Hello, chess fans. Welcome to another edition of Chess Chat, a program designed to give you, the viewer, a better understanding of the exciting world of chess. I am your host, George Merijanian, Program Director of the Wachusett Chess Club at Fitchburg State University. And with me today at the Fitchburg Access Television studio, in the control room, is our highly skilled director, Darren Dame, assisted by our multi-time Wachusett Chess Club champion, Bruce Felton of Fitchburg. And behind the camera is one of our staunchest Wachusett Chess Club members, Brian Bigelow of Leominster. And last but not least is with me my longtime colleague and co-host, Martin Lane of Lunenburg, one of the strongest and most active chess players in North Central Massachusetts. Hi, Marty.
Oh, George, good to see you again.
Always a pleasure to see you, Marty. Well, Marty, today we're going to focus our attention on the world's most prolific chess writer, Fred Reinfeld. And Fred Reinfeld actually has written more than 100 chess books. No one in the world has even come close to what he has produced in terms of chess literature than Fred Reinfeld. Now, we've got a photo of Fred Reinfeld that's from back in, I think, in the 40s, possibly 50s. This is Fred Reinfeld. He was, because he was such a prolific chess writer, most of the people who started chess back, pre-World War pre-World War II, I should say, and after World War II, they actually came across books by Fred Reinfeld. I mean, you found them in public libraries, you found them in bookstores. Here's another photo of Fred Reinfeld at the board. He is best known as a chess writer, although he was an accomplished chess master. Now, what do you know something about Fred Reinfeld?
Well, yeah, we did. He's the kind of person you know as a chess writer, but know very little about him. He did write a few biographical notes. There's a cover for some of his books there.
Right, we're seeing now some of the covers of books.
He didn't take up chess until he was 14 years old in 1924. He would be 102 this month, by the way.
Wow.
And in 1924, when he was 14, there was a huge tournament going on in New York, the New York International. All the top players in the world were there.
Yes.
And he was a schoolboy in the New York public schools. And that was just at the time that he got interested in chess. He learned it at school. He continued, and within a few years, he was competing at the highest levels. And he started off on a career as a player, and the game we're going to see, he played against Samuel Reshevsky, one of the world's top players at the time, one of the world's top players in history.
A prodigy. Samuel Reshevsky was a prodigy.
So he was already playing at a world-class level within a few years of learning the game. But then, when Fred Reinfeld was inducted into the Chess Hall of Fame in 1996, 22 years after he died, his son made a few remarks at the occasion, and his son said that he gave up competitive chess to write about chess because he wanted to keep his family financially secure. Trying to make money as a chess player was a really iffy proposition in those days. Yes. And so he started writing books, and he said his son said he enjoyed the game throughout his life, enjoyed going through people's games and analyzing, but he didn't play competitively after, what, 1950-something?
Well, when the U.S. Chess Federation issued their first rating list in 1950, he was ranked 6th on that list. Right. In 1951, when they issued the second rating list, he was removed from that list because of inactivity. Right. But he certainly was active during the Depression years and during the 1940s, but he stopped actually in the early 50s. Yeah. And he had won the New York State Championship in 1931, in 1933. He had won the championship of the Marshall Chess Club in 1940, followed by the Manhattan Chess Club Championship in 1941. So
he certainly could have pursued a major international chess career.
Absolutely.
But chose to go into chess and write popular books, to bring chess. And his son said that his goal was to bring chess to the people.
Therefore, he actually became America's chess teacher. Right. Because players learn chess from Fred Reinfeld.
And people still read his books.
Oh, absolutely. And
the Complete Chess Course is a classic.
He did. He taught at Columbia and also the city of
NYU.
NYU.
NY, right.
Right.
Yeah.
Not only did he write chess books, Marty, he also wrote books on other subjects.
Right.
I think we saw maybe a graphic of how to win at checkers, but he also wrote books on coins, coin collecting, stamps, medicine,
geology, mining,
theology, mining,
whaling, I saw,
jurisprudence, history. This guy was phenomenal. When the outpouring of subjects that he wrote on was unquestionably massive.
Well, we have a long game.
Yes, okay, so this is a game, this was played against Sammy Reshevsky in 1932. The tournament was called the Western Championship, but actually it evolved into, this was the U.S. Open.
Right.
This was the 1932 U.S. Open, which was the 33rd consecutive year they held this. So this was held in Minneapolis, Minnesota. And who had white in this game?
Fred Reinfeld.
Okay, so what did he open against Sammy Reshevsky?
He moved the pawn on D2 to D4. We haven't talked about this as much, but it opens up, moves a central pawn, occupies a central square, opens up a diagonal for the dark squared bishop, opens up some space for the queen as well.
Okay, so Reshevsky, in response to D4, played the knight on G8 to play F6.
Right.
Now he could have played D5, but knight F6 stops white from putting another pawn in the center.
Well, it doesn't entirely stop him because he plays pawn on C2 to C4, which isn't quite the center, but it's close. It attacks.
Right. Okay. So, and that is normal. That is the normal second move in response to knight F6. So what Reshevsky did on the second move, he played pawn E6. E6 is his move. Opens up now for the dark squared bishop to come out. He had other choies. He could have played D5,
G6,
G6, but the E6 is a very good move. All right, so what did Reinfeld play here?
Well, in the opening, you want to develop your pieces. He could, and this would be common, to play the knight on B1 to C3, but that invites the pin of the dark squared bishop.
Oh, a pin? You mean if he had played, and that's a good response, is to pin the knight.
Right.
And by the way, there's a quote by Reinfeld on the pin.
The pin is mightier than the sword.
The pin is mightier than the sword. That's Reinfeld thought of that. So, all right, but he didn't play.
But he did develop the other knight, the knight on G1 to F3. It develops the knight. There's an old saying, knights before bishops and all that.
Okay. So Reshevsky now on this third move, he could have played. He could have actually come out here with a check.
Could have still done
okay, that's a possibility. Or played the bishop on E7 followed by castling. But instead, he played B6. Now, what is this signal?
It goes by the name of the Queen's Indian defense. Indian because these fianchetto openings are often called Indian, refers to the ancient days of India, and it's on the Queen's side.
So he's preparing to
fianchetto,
the bishop.
Now, White has a number of choices. He could now develop the bishop on the knight on B1 to C3. He could play A2 to A3, which is popular. It prevents that pin.
You know who used to play that? The
Bruce
A3.
Feldman.
Huh?
Bruce Feldman.
Bruce Feldman. Yes, our move coordinator would be one to play that. Right. But also a former world champion, Tigran Petrosyan.
Right. Yes.
Also champion. Yes. A3. Right. But instead,
he plays the pawn on G2 to G3, preparing to counter the queenside fianchetto with his own kingside fianchetto, and this was the main line in the 1920s.
And this was recommended. This was actually very, very popular.
Right in the 20s and 30s.
So what Reshevsky did was play bishop B7. He could have played. There are continuations.
That's a more modern.
Bishop A6 with attack on the undefended C pawn.
Kasparov was very big on
Gary Kasparov played that certainly. But what Reshevsky played was bishop B7. Right. And he's on the diagonal. He's on the long diagonal.
So White is prepared to contest that diagonal. He takes the bishop on F1, plays to G3.
All right.
Preparing to castle.
Okay, so it's Black's move, and Black actually has choices here. Black could have actually taken this bishop on F8 and played it to E7, followed by castling. That was possible. Or he could actually come out here and still done the check, bishop B4 check. So he could have done two moves with the bishop, but instead he chose C5. So he comes up, attacks the pawn on D4.
Right. Yeah, and Black is he wants to sort of mix up White's pawn position.
Right.
Now, White could play quietly and just castle, but that would lead to a very passive kind of a game.
Yes.
The way that Reinfeld chooses to approach this, and it turns out to be the correct way, and is to take an aggressive approach. He advances that pawn on D4 to D5.
All right. Okay.
He's not so much to exchange the pawn on e6, but he's threatening to push
it. Actually, that is a threat, to advance to the d6 and really restrict, cramps Black's position here. So what Reshevsky did was capture. He took the e-pawn, e takes d5 is his reply. Okay, and what did Reinfeld do here?
Well, here, you know, he can't just simply recapture because it's Black is it's as if he's giving up a pawn. What he does is he plays the knight on f3 to h5
or h4. Okay, yeah,
h4. Sorry.
Right. Okay.
And opening up an attack on that pawn by the bishop, but more so he cannot now play d takes c because the bishop is unprotected.
Yeah. So he's pinned. So this pawn is pinned. So Black cannot win a pawn because he would not only lose the bishop, he'd also follow it up and lose the rook. Right. So because of that, so this was an excellent move playing knight h4. So what Reshevsky played here was g6, which also stops the knight actually from sinking into f5.
That was sort of a future.
Yes, but it also shows a
double fianchetto.
Shows like he's going to fianchetto himself.
Right.
All right. So what did Reinfeld do here?
Well, he's going to develop his knight. He takes the knight on b1, plays it to c3, creating another attack now on the d5.
All right. So we have a double attack on the triple actually with the queen. So we have three pieces attacking the
quadruple. I'm sorry.
One, it's even four. Yeah. A pawn and three pieces attacking this pawn, which is only defended with. Remember, well, okay. So what Reshevsky did here, what Reshevsky didn't do here, is he could have actually just simply played bishop g7.
Right, that would be the move that would make sense.
And that would make sense. And I think most of the players, even back then when this variation was being used, I remember Capablanca against Alyechin in 1929 in New York. Played bishop, reached the same position, played bishop g7, and other top players will always continue with bishop g7 and just castle. But what Reshevsky did, he played h6. He moved the pawn from h7 to h6. There has to be a reason why he did this, and the only reason we could understand.
He must have been worried about the pin again on g5.
He must have been worried about that bishop going to g5, pinning the knight. That's the only explanation that makes sense. All right, so what did Reinfeld do now after h6?
He continues with his development by castling.
Right.
Brings the king to a safe place. Brings the rook towards more towards the center.
And Reshevsky now that he has stopped the pin, could have continued with bishop g7, but again, he plays a6. He suddenly shifts over to the queen side, plays a6, okay? So it's just like cat and mouse. He's waiting to see what white does here.
Well, but he's made way too many pawn moves considering, comparing the development.
Well, he's way behind. Black is way behind in development here. Okay, so what did Reinfeld do here?
Now Reinfeld takes advantage of all this attack on and he recaptures the pawn finally on d5. He plays c-take, 10th move was c-take d5.
Okay. And now Reshevsky plays another pawn move.
Well, he has to prevent he's renewed the threat of pushing to d6.
Okay, so what he does he plays d6. Right. Okay, so he's blocked the advance of that d pawn, and now it's Reinfeld's move.
Right. So now he's going to begin his activity in the center. He takes the pawn on e2 and plays it to e4, completely closing in now the black bishop.
Black's light squared bishop. Okay. So now Reshevsky fianchettos the dark square, but plays bishop g7. All right. So now,
and Reinfeld continues with a pawn storm. He takes the pawn on f2 and advances it to f4. So his intentions are pretty clear.
All right. So now this is what's interesting here is now Reshevsky could have castled here, but instead he chose to redeploy this knight on f6 and play knight f d7. He brings the knight back, retreats the knight. Okay. So what does Reinfeld do in response to this?
He makes an interesting move. He plays the pawn on, after all those kingside moves and preparing what looks like preparing a kingside attack, he suddenly plays a2 to a4. But for a very good reason. He wants to, in a position like this, he wants to restrict his opponent's movements. He doesn't want to give him the opportunity to create more space by playing b5. So
that was the threat.
That was the threat.
Black's threat was to start attacking on the queen side. All right. So after a4 stopping, Black playing b5, we have Black castling. Reshevsky castled down. It took him, what, 13 moves to do this,
right.
But he is now castled.
Okay,
all right.
So except for his major piece, the one remaining minor piece that hasn't been developed yet is his bishop on c1. He plays that to e3.
Okay, bishop e3.
Opens up, the back rank now for the rooks and queen.
All right. So now what Reshevsky played was, evidently, he played the king to h7. Now, do you have any idea why he would go here?
The only thing I can think of is he was maybe worried that white was going to play the queen to d2 and then open up an attack on that.
Oh, I see. If the king were on g8, he'd have to come to the further defense of that pawn on h6.
Yeah.
Okay.
But he doesn't do that. I mean, Reinfeld does. He plays the queen on d1 to c2. All these pieces now are aimed at the king. The queen is down there and the bishop and so on.
All right. Well, now Reshevsky takes the knight that he retreated to d7 and goes back to f6. He goes to knight f6. Right. But he has a threat, though.
Right.
By playing the knight. What is his threat here?
Well, his threat is he's going to come down to g4 and harass this bishop here.
Right.
On e3. So
he would like to eliminate that dark squared bishop.
Yeah, he would love to get rid of that.
Okay.
And so Reinfeld simply plays h2 to h3. Now this, I mean, we've criticized the h6 and the a6 moves, but this move makes sense, even though it's a rook pawn and we're moving at one space, because it cuts down the scope of black's knight.
Yes, it does.
That
knight now cannot go to g4 and attack the bishop. All right. So what Reshevsky played after h3, he now brings this knight, which has not moved at all yet, on b8, knight bd7. So now he's actually developed that knight.
And Reinfeld, preparing his attack, he takes the rook on a1 and moves it to e1. Now he's got his rooks in the center. His queen is aimed at the king. He's building up his attack.
Okay, so what Reshevsky played here after white played rook ae1 was rook e8. He actually places his rook on the e file.
Yeah, and so there's the kind of one of the sort of putting pressure on that e4 pawn. So Reinfeld decides to add one more defender to it by retreating his bishop temporarily here to f2. That opens up the rook on e1 to support the e4 pawn.
Okay, so is there a threat of advancing that pawn now?
There is now.
Okay, because there's a threat of advancing that pawn to e5, Reshevsky retreats this knight on f6 to g8. He plays knight g8, which now actually there's a fight over this e5 square.
Right. So if you look at it, it looks like, well, that e5 square is secure for black. But Reinfeld goes ahead anyway.
He goes ahead with it anyway.
Yeah, he pushes it ahead.
Okay. So after Reinfeld pushes e5, well, Reshevsky captures d. Because he's got
4 attackers.
Because he's got 1, 2, 3, four attackers with the rook. So he figures, I will take the pawn. D takes e5. So, but he overlooked something here.
But instead of recapturing, he pushes the pawn on f4 to f5, because this knight all along has been eyeing this square here.
All right.
Or now he's threatening to take with the g6. With
check. How many things that we have attacking this pawn on g6 here?
1, 2, the queen.
We got the queen, the knight, and the pawn, and this is defend. How many times is this pawn defended?
Once plus, but the king can't count. But he can't capture.
So what he has to do is, doesn't he have to defend that pawn again? So after that pawn push f5, he brings the knight on d7 to f8 and adds a further defender of that pawn on g6. All right, so it's Reinfeld's move here.
So he's going to continue on his attack on the king's position now. He's going to capture that g6 pawn with check. F takes g6 check. That was the 21st move.
Okay, and Reshevsky recaptures with his f pawn. He plays f takes g6. All right, so he's still protecting here with the knight, and
he's got two protectors.
Two protectors.
Two attackers. So
two attackers.
So Reinfeld is going to add a third attacker. He plays the bishop to e4.
All right, so now we have 4 pieces attacking that poor pawn on g6, and that pawn needs another defender. Black needs to defend that pawn one more time, and the only piece that can do that is the queen, because the rook certainly cannot move up to e6. That square is controlled by the white pawn on d5. So Reshevsky plays queen d6. So now the queen comes into the defense of the pawn on g6.
So now Reinfeld is going to add the bishop back into the game here by playing bishop on f2 to e3, also opening up the f file for the rook, adding an attack now on the h6 pawn.
Okay. Well, yes. So what Reshevsky plays here is the knight on g8 goes to e7, adding another defender. So the knight plays the e7, so he's got the two knights, the king, the queen. Okay, he's defending that pawn on g6. Right. All right.
So now Reinfeld takes that gives Reinfeld really a strong tactical opportunity. He takes the rook on f1 and plays it to f7. It's always generally considered good to have a rook down on your opponent's seventh rank.
Yeah, is that actually a good thing to do if you're able to put a rook on the seventh rank?
Put one, because it exerts a lot of threats right inside the enemy, your opponent's territory.
So given the opportunity, you should always seize the seventh rank and put a rook on it. Right. And always, also, as we saw, white seized the open file and always put a rook on an open file, but also seize the seventh rank. Okay. Right. All right, so in this position with the rook
bishop is now pinned.
Okay, because of that pin. So Reshevsky doesn't like this pin, this pawn being pinned, so he moves the king now to g8, comes back and attacks the rook, gets off this pin, and now is attacking the rook on f7.
So, but that gives Reinfeld the opportunity to double his rooks on the f rank. He moves the rook from e1 to f1. Now he's got doubled rooks on the open file.
All right. So what Reshevsky did here, he realizes he's got an attacker here. He's got his bishop, knight, and queen attacking this pawn on d5, which is only protected twice with these two minor pieces. So what he does is play knight takes the pawn on d5. Knight takes d5 is his move. So he's actually, how many, he's up pawns here.
2 pawns.
Up 2 pawns, he's ahead 2 pawns. But his position is not good.
Right.
Even despite being ahead 2 pawns.
Yeah. Now, by doing that, however, he left this bishop. This bishop is unprotected.
Aha.
And so this gives white the opportunity to capture the bishop on b7.
Okay, so rook takes b7, but in response to that, Reshevsky plays knight captures the bishop on e3, knight takes e3, and he's forking the queen and the rook.
Yeah, normally that would cause a lot of panic.
Yes, all right, but how does Reinfeld respond to that?
Well, you respond with one threat, with a bigger threat. He plays the queen on c2 to f2, now threatening to bring the queen down to f7, leaving to mate on the next move.
So black cannot allow this check to happen, because if the check comes, he would follow it up with the queen capturing the bishop with mate.
Right.
All right.
So he has
and he has a knight, which is
right. So he has to somehow solve the problem.
He has to solve trying to save the knight. He has one major problem with the knight threat. So what Reshevsky does is retreat the knight. He plays knight f5, blocks stops the check with the queen on f7, but plays knight f5.
Yeah, but that's sort of only a temporary measure, because white can now play knight on h4, take the knight on f5.
All right, and in response to that, he takes back with the pawn. Yeah, doesn't G pawn? G takes f5, right? He recaptures.
That's the only thing to do.
The only thing he has, yeah.
So now the queen takes on f5, renewing the threat of the mate on f7.
Okay, so that was queen takes f5. Well, now what Reshevsky plays is king over to h8. Yeah, because he cannot allow this this check on f7 follow the mate with the queen.
And there's no way that he can block that.
So by doing this, he avoids that queen check on f7. All right, so
if we want to go back for a moment, he can't block that, because then he can. What can he do? Can he take? He can.
No, he would just simply take rook takes d7, and then he could take this rook. He wins that rook, so he can't block.
So he has
to stop the check by moving king h8. Okay.
So now he takes the rook that's on b2, brings it back to f7, tripling on this file and discovering an attack on the a.
But what is the threat actually he has? You see how this knight
Right.
is protecting this
H7,
square?
right.
If that queen were able to go to this square,
That would be checkmate.
checkmate.
So he can eliminate the defender.
By sacrificing this rook, that is, rook takes f8, check, and after the recapture, the queen comes right at the h7, it's mate.
Right.
So in order to stop that sacrifice, what Reshevsky did, he played knight g6, but after he played knight g6, he resigned.
You're right.
He must have seen that is not good. Why did he resign? That is, he played the move. Then he must have seen, after he played the move, that's not good.
Right. A lot of us looked long and hard at this position.
Yes, we did, and we were trying to figure out, what should white do? Should white actually capture this, win the exchange by playing bishop takes a8? Right. No, there's something even stronger.
Right.
And we came to the conclusion.
Queen to there?
Yeah, right, exactly.
We thought about that.
So what do we discover is actually the correct way to continue?
Well, what we found was if the rook takes the bishop on g7. It's not check, but he needs to.
But he is now with now he's threatening the knight here.
Right.
He's threatening to win this piece.
Right.
Remember, he's got the bishop attacking this rook. He's got the rook attacking the knight, as well as the queen attacking the knight. So what do we say? Black accepts the sacrifice, and if he accepts the sacrifice, he doesn't have much of a choice because he's going to lose material. So he plays king takes the rook, king takes g7,
so actually,
and how do we continue?
So right now, in terms of material, black is up the exchange, we say.
Right.
He has,
right.
But, white has all the attacking moves. Then we decided the queen comes down, f7, check.
Giving black only one move, one square to go to, and that's king h8. And now comes the important, what the Germans would call a Zwischenzug, an in-between move.
Right.
And that is do not take this knight.
Take the rook
we
or the
could.
Knight.
Well, but there's something even stronger.
Something even better.
There's something even stronger than either taking the rook on a8 or taking this knight on g6.
Right.
What was the in-between move?
Playing the rook to f3, threatening the queen.
Okay, so
now the queen has no good. It can only come to here check, but that doesn't really work. After the queen can move out of the way.
Well, yeah,
check.
we could actually show that.
Yeah.
If he were to go queen d4 check,
then
the king
goes
now
to a
just
white square, the h1.
And there are no more checks because
the knight is covering all the squares.
Right. He cannot come down to d1 because the knight covers that square, and so he has to stick around here.
Right.
Right. So, but what can he do? Can he actually? There's nothing he can do here that is because, all right, let's say he does this. Let's go back. He does this, check, okay. And what's the threat? What happens if he, no, I don't see it here. This is, no, that's why Reshevsky resigned here, because after this move, where can he go? What if he goes, for example, here? Let's say he goes here. It's not going to work, is it? Well, if he goes here, offering the exchange,
simply go here, right?
Exactly. And what's going to happen?
Threatening check.
He's only checking that. He's only checking that
because the blocking.
Right, and he also could play rook f7 followed by mate here. Right. So yeah. So this is why in this position,
there's nothing black can do.
Nothing to do. So Reshevsky, as black, resigned. And again, this is 1932. He had won this tournament. The 1931, the U.S. Open, it was played in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and he was, again, of course, there was a 1 year difference. Reinfeld was 1 year older, but Reshevsky was one of the top players in the country and the world. He was a prodigy. Right. At the age of 5, Reshevsky was actually giving simultaneous exhibitions.
Little
sailor suit. If anyone were to Google it,
do a program on Reshevsky.
We're going to do a program on Reshevsky. So I hope our chess fans enjoyed this game. And by the way, didn't Reinfeld defeat Reshevsky twice?
Right.
Yeah.
Hit a positive.
Who else did he defeat? Did he defeat
Reuben Fine?
Reuben Fine. How about Frank Marshall?
Yeah.
We did a program on Frank Marshall. So Reinfeld, as you pointed out, Reinfeld, if he had continued, would have been a world-class player. So hopefully, chess fans, we'll see you next time for another edition of Chess Chat. We have a big surprise for you at our next edition. See you then.
So, yeah, I didn't put